operate in truth, right? Operate in truth. Tell the truth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Gator Truth. I'm Daniel, and on this episode, we're going to take a look back at the Gators' thrilling 29-21 victory over the Texas Longhorns this past Saturday in the Swamp. And what a time to be in the Swamp, for sure. Florida comes in, pulls off the upset. We'll talk about the upset portion later on, but definitely takes down, at the time, a top 10 ranked Texas, now unranked. But either way, a good win, a great win coming out of the bye, coming after a 1-3 start. And yeah, just something that we really needed, really wanted to see, and definitely a good time. I do have to give a shout out to the fans that were there. It was a great atmosphere. Now, I do agree with some people that will say, well, the Swamp was at like 7 to 80%, which is true. However, that was still such an environment that there are Texas fans posting on Twitter and talking about elsewhere about how it is perhaps the loudest environment they've ever been in. You have Steve Sarkisian coming out and saying, well, you have any other team go to Columbus to take on the Buckeyes and go to the Swamp and tell me how they fare. So definitely that says a lot about the environment. It was loud, and I had tweeted out the other day, when you give fans a reason to care, the Swamp is like no other place. And I do agree with that. I stand by that. Without further ado, let's go ahead. Let's just get into it. And of course, as always, we're going to look at the keys I gave out, see how we did with those. Very first thing, and we've heard me say it over and over again, which is give Jaden Ball the ball. I've said run the ball, and in this game, couldn't have done it any better. 27 carries, 107 yards, 1 touchdown, and sure, he averaged only 4 yards per carry, but it went down towards the end when people knew we were running. But for the most part, it was just, him having a great day running the ball, of course, getting the first touchdown of the game, getting some crucial big runs early. And it is interesting. Billy Napier did have a quote after the game. When you have a player like that, you have to give him his opportunities. And of course, I keep saying he needs more than 20 carries a game, and a lot of other people have said that. But I see that that line from Billy Napier, and it's like, okay, well then why is he, disappeared after early success against LSU, or not been seen too much against Miami and getting such few carries? And so it's definitely interesting, but it's like some of us, where like you give him the run and he's going to do big things. And we'll actually talk about one of those big things as we move on. The next key I gave to the game: offensive line, tight end, improved blocking. And I will say this, the offensive line, that right side, definitely had not been good this year. And they really stepped up in this game. We had many good runs on the right side of the line. It was impressive. Kind of makes me question a little bit about Texas's defensive line, but I'll take it. They still got to do what they've got to do, and they did. And by doing that, you had Baugh getting over 100 yards. You had Duke Clark come in, get 9 carries, 38 yards, 4.2 yards per carry. Went to the locker room at one point during the game, but again, lot better O-line play, and that really helped, and also some good tight end blocking, although we still had a tight end penalty for holding that kind of hampered a drive. But That's right. Overall, a much better performance than we've seen at all this year from the offense. And the next key I had, of course, was hitting throws beyond the line of scrimmage. And this is where I really want to talk about. I mean, we started from the beginning. First play hit Dallas Wilson. He fumbles, recovers his own fumble. And of course, Dallas Wilson, I've got to say, what a game. First game as a Gator, comes out in the swamp against a big name opponent in Texas, gets 6 catches for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns, with the long touchdown being a just amazing 55-yard touchdown run. The initial defender falls down, but then he powers his way through 2 defenders in the last 10 yards to get into the end zone. Amazing job by Dallas Wilson. Of course, 5-star receiver we had not seen yet this year. Had a few other big catches. And one thing I talked about before, and I'll say again, is it'd be nice to see us break away from tendencies such as only doing slants on 3rd or 4th down. Well, Dallas Wilson's first touchdown catch was a slant on a 2nd and 10, which is definitely not our tendency. And I think it helped out. Now let's go back to things Jaden Baugh did, and this ties into the hitting throws beyond the line of scrimmage. I don't know why, but Texas really started going against what some people would call the meta, the perfect way to defend this offense, or the way other teams such as FSU, Tulane, USF, LSU, Miami have given this offense fits, and that's to play a lot of zone coverage. And Texas played a mix of man and zone early and then really went to man. And part of that was Jaden Baugh's success in running. And again, credit to the offensive line for blocking a lot better than they have. But because of that, they went to single high man. Now, single high man, what that means is you have one safety basically back there playing center field. We talked about after the LSU game, one of the picks, if they're playing single high, it doesn't happen. Probably DJ Lagway gets a touchdown rather than a pick in the end zone. But a lot of teams have been playing 2 high safeties and taking away the deep ball. Texas, for whatever reason, decided we're not going to do that. Now, again, some of that success of Jaden Baugh, and some of that, hey, this is how we play defense. We're not going to change it for our opponent, which, well, they paid for it. Vernell Brown, VB3, had an amazing big time catch where he jumped up over the defender, arguably should have been pass interference on the defender, catches the ball, and then somehow gets his footing, continues running, and gets a big gain of 60 yards. Actually, the longest reception of the game. Of course, we talked about Dallas Wilson having, the 55-yard touchdown reception, and both these guys being true freshmen. That's good to see. But on that play where Vernell Brown makes a 60-yard play, a big explosive play in the passing game. Again, vertical passing, something we've needed, and it doesn't have to be deep. In fact, the Dallas Wilson touchdown pass, that really wasn't too deep on the sideline where he caught it. But, again, the guy fell down. We took advantage of it. And then he runs through the guys. This one the Vernell Brown happened to be deep, but Texas was in single high. DJ looks to his left for a second or two before turning and throwing it pretty much straight down the middle to VB3, but through that 1 or 2 seconds, looking to the left at the guy on the left. And of course, we talked about, again, let's go back to that LSU play where there's only one vertical route and you had 2 high safety. Well, that if you had single high safety against LSU, and if you had another vertical route where DJ could turn his eyes and kind of freeze, and I believe we talked about this after LSU, freeze the safety and then, or the safety drifts towards that guy, that's going to open room for the receiver. And that's what happened on this play. He looks towards the left just a little bit, and that leaves the middle of the field open for VB3 to get the ball and then make a nice run after the catch, because they're in that single high man, which is pretty much the thing you don't want to do against Lagway. And kudos to DJ Lagway for taking advantage of it. Lots of time. There it was, and he made the throws. Wasn't perfect on the day, but I'd say 21, 28, 75% completion percentage, 298, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. The one interception, I believe he thought he had a big play, and he might have, but his arm gets hit as he's trying to release the ball. Unfortunately, when that happens, ball, I saw it live, the ball becomes a wounded duck and he easily interceptable. And I'm texting with my brother who's not at the game, and he goes, hey, he had a touchdown and he throws to the left. And that is true. Go watch the replay. Guy's wide open. Of course, he sees his first read, and I bet he feels good about it, so he goes to throw. And I said, yeah, well, the ball got tipped. He goes, it didn't get tipped. And then he goes, okay, saw the replay. DJ's arm got hit. And he goes, how'd you know that? I go, because you can see, the ball and the difference in what it looked like out of his hand versus how it looked all day, or at least in the stadium you could. So I'm not really going to give him as much grief for an interception where he gets hit while throwing. Maybe should have moved on to his different reads, but I don't know if the wide open read was even read 2. And since there's a guy that clearly hits him, whether he had time to get through all his progressions or not is a question. But with that said, again, we did take advantage this time of hitting throws beyond the line of scrimmage, and we took advantage of wide receiver talent. Now, Mazzell only had 4 catches, I believe, in the game for 18 yards. The funny thing about it is, even with so few yards, picks up a first down at one point and makes a few good plays early. And then there's a screen thrown to him, terribly thrown screen. He jumps up, pops it up, catches it to himself, should be tackled for a loss. Well, he makes a guy or two miss and turns into a 4-yard gain. And if the ball was put on the money, he might have a lot more than that. So kudos to him. And of course, Dallas Wilson was big time. Vernell Brown, the third, big time. Sturdivant, 2 catches for 42 yards. Really, what you want from this Texas game is, or what you want to see from this offense is what we got. Again, we run the ball. We had improved blocking, the offensive line's best performance of the year, which also did help us hit throws beyond the line of scrimmage and take advantage of the wide receiver talent. And it also helped that for some reason, Texas decided to play the opposite of what the best thing to play against this offense and DJ Lagway is. And hey, I will take it. If other teams want to give that to us, I think we can take advantage of it as well. So let's go ahead. Let's switch over to defense. First key I had was pressure Arch, and pointed out he had issues with pressure. Well, looking at Pro Football Focus, I think they said we had 22 quarterback hurries. I saw a stat when I rewatched. The graphic said 6 sacks, I believe, and 8 hits on Arch Manning. I think officially we had 6 sacks, some half sacks. Brian Taylor Jr. at the defensive tackle position really hasn't done much this year, and then ends up with 1.5 sacks and 1.5 tackles for loss, which I believe is the same stat, but still had a good day for himself coming in, doing that. Devin Moore got himself a sack. And one thing I really enjoyed was this team. We saw Moore, we saw Shreve Denson get in there, cause some pressure. And of course, we saw it impact this Texas defense. And of course, with that Texas or with that pressure, you had the crowd into it. And someone had tweeted, I wish I knew who it was to send you to them, but someone had tweeted, when you see the multiple false starts, when you see things like a receiver start running the play before the ball snapped, you know that's what a crowd affecting a team looks like. And that's what the Swamp did Saturday night. And I'm like, you know what? You're totally right. And so, yeah, that pressure was great. And I said, let's have solid run defense. Well, this stat is going to be surprising. Texas, granted, they didn't run Jarrett Gibson. And, I'm trying. Now it's going to bother me because I'm not going to think of, CJ Baxter. So they did not play two of their top running backs, or at least they didn't register a carry. But they did have Wisner's been pretty good. Overall, as a team, now sacks are included in this. Texas had 26 carries for 52 yards. That's 2 yards per carry. With that said, 36 of those rushing yards came on one scramble by Arch, who had 15 carries. Again, this includes sack yardage. 15 carries, 37 yards. So outside of his one scramble for 36 yards, he had 14 carries for 1 yard. That is phenomenal from this Gators defense. And I've got to say, I'll admit I probably overrated some of this Texas offense for sure. I think the defense also was a little bit overrated by me. That's on me. But I do think at the same time, you can credit our performance. I mean, both things can be true. And in fact, I think you go back, you listen. If you haven't had a chance, go back and listen to my talk with Longhorn Republic before the season. They felt that the offensive line would be fine. And one thing we talked about was, this being the first SEC game and the second road game, the first one being in Columbus. And I had said, I wish you didn't have a big road game before, so it'd be your first road experience and we could really see what goes nuts. Well, the special night in the Swamp did happen afternoon, but it did go nuts, did cause lots of problems. And we saw, the pressure. We saw the solid run D, the discipline D. Overall, there was a very disciplined defense, caused lots of havoc, lots of issues. But I will say this. I talked about some great misdirection, and Texas had some big plays, and some of which they missed. Their first touchdown was set up. Of course, there was a really hard hit on Parker Livingston, one of Texas's top receivers, who is also Arch Manning's roommate, gets hit in the knee to take him down, and he did not return to the game. But he had a big 33-yard catch, and that was, kind of rolling right, get everything going, and then Livingston is there on the left sideline, almost exactly like the play I mentioned from last year that worked against us. And our safety gets over, makes the play to stop the touchdown there, but Texas ends up scoring anyways. There was the double pass where if Texas completes it, maybe it's a different game. And also there was one time, speaking of pressure on Arch, where Arch actually had a guy streaking down the seam wide open, except for he missed. Now, a lot of that was due to the pressure. But there are some wide open guys, but that's why pressure and stuff makes a difference. And some of that's just discipline problems. The long touchdown pass to, I believe was to Wingo. Cormani McClain is getting some grief. I'm not saying it's not completely justified, but I do think there are some misunderstandings there. Cormani McClain seems to have outside leverage, and we talked about this back in Utah 2023, very first touchdown pass, first play of the game for Utah. Jason Marshall got a lot of grief for it, and I'm like, well, we had a safety who was playing one high. Where's our safety playing center field? Well, if you look at the play, yes, Cormani's got outside leverage, but you would think the Bryce Thornton, who's playing single high, actually lines up a little more to the opposite side, but he's clearly playing single high, did not pay attention, did not keep everyone in front of him. And I think Cormani thought, and maybe I'm wrong on the call, but it looks like we're seeing single high from Thornton, and he just doesn't look at the right side of the field to get deep with it. So in my mind, I'm wondering where that single high was, if Cormani, with that outside leverage to make sure, Wingo doesn't go back, run a corner route or something rather than a post, doesn't think, okay, I'm on the outside, so when the post comes in, I've got a safety that's going to come cut it off. But either way, I mean, is what it is. Overall, great discipline, D. Phenomenal game from this defense. 21 points is what it is. But again, there were opportunities for more, and there was also a lot of things that the Gators did to shut this down. A+. Really can't say enough about how great of a defensive game that the team had. So anyway, speaking of the team, I wanted a few penalties, no special teams flags. We didn't really have any special teams flags. Few penalties. Overall, it was good. Like I said, there's a holding call that I remember, but overall, and of course, we helped them out later in the game. I believe it was on the last drive with a hands to the face. Can't do that. But again, sometimes that's one that just sometimes happens in football. You're trying to run, you put your hand up. I don't like it. Don't do it. But it's not like, spitting on a guy on USF's final drive to give him 15, something that's, completely, sometimes you just throw your hand up, you get in the face, and it's unfortunate. Again, should do better, but it is what it is. For the team, I also said the team needs to start strong. Well, 10 points on your first two possessions, I will take that. Now, I think there are things that we could have done maybe a little better. You just start off 14-0, like we went to 12 personnel and ran levels. And I was just thinking as I was watching the tight end, I believe it was Livingston, run across and get no separation. I'm like, no one can keep up with Mazzell if this were 11 personnel, so 3 receivers instead of 2 tight ends, just having 1 tight end. I'm like, Mazzell would definitely be getting this first down and be open because no one's keeping up with him. But again, that's just a small gripe. Great strong start, and also great start by this defense. Look for a big kickoff on a punt, or big return on a kickoff or a punt. Didn't really happen, but we didn't really need it. Although the kickoff team it was kind of an issue for sure on that last little squib kick where VB3 doesn't really play it well, and we end up taking over on a big drive inside the 5. We did see the team play with the backs against the wall, and this team seems to respond with backs against the wall. Well, I've said one game shouldn't change you. We didn't come here, we didn't come to where we are on our thoughts on the coaching staff and stuff through one game, and I don't think one game, changes that. But hey, if you play like this with your backs against the wall, realize what's on the line every week and keep this up, well then great. But we'll see how that is. Now, with that said, I do have to drop a little bit of a truth bomb. Again, I probably had Texas overhyped in my mind. That's on me. Again, great win for the Gators. Should have probably done a little bit better. We do need to close out games. There's no reason this game should have had to have a sack with 11 seconds left to end the game. This game should have been well before that. No reason we couldn't have gotten we had three straight 3-and-outs, or not 3 straight punts, or maybe it was 3-and-outs and then a punt. Either way, no scoring, through near the end of the game. I think it was 4 straight drives if you include that last one where we punted. And you just got to keep your foot on the gas. And some of the times we didn't really pressure. After we blocked the punt, got the ball, we, went really conservative. And when it was a chance to potentially go up 26-7, and the game's pretty much over right there. But again, it's the coaching mentality. But great game. And I'm not trying to take away. I think you can look at both things of a lot of things went right, but there are things that when we face better teams, we've got to do better. And part of that, what I want to say is also when I say better teams, and maybe I overhype Texas, I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, this Texas team has faced 2 Power 4 opponents and they're 0-2 so far. We'll learn more about them next week when they, play Oklahoma and the rivalry game. But they also go to Georgia. They also play A&M. They've got, I believe, Mississippi State. I'm trying to think of, there's one more that's just escaping me. I mean, Vanderbilt's one, but I don't think that's it. Maybe it was Georgia, Texas A&M, and Georgia A&M and Oklahoma that are potentially problems from. This is a Texas team that might end up 8-4, 7-5, 6-6. And anyone who's listened to the show for a while knows that I count more the ranking at the end of the season and how teams finish versus when you play them. So it's good to beat a team that's in the top 10. But if they finish 6-6, it needs to be looked at through that lens. And so that's just part of what we're going to see. Now, if they end up 10-2, heck yeah, then we really celebrate through that lens as well. But my greatest example of this is Georgia Tech last year beats FSU to kick off the season. Am I really going to say, wow, you beat a top 10 team when the team ended up 2-10? No. But, it's a fun win. It's definitely something you want, much better than losing. But at the same time, value is determined for me at the end of the season, or the full value. There's definitely value in everything, but the full value determined at the end of the season. Such as when I talk about 2003, hardest schedule ever, finished with 7 we faced, including the bowl, 7 teams in the final top 15, which is ridiculous. Those 7 teams all ended up with 10 wins. So when we talk about hardest schedules ever, that was a hard schedule with a true freshman quarterback, and you faced 7 teams with 10 wins and an Arkansas team that finished unranked that had 9 wins in Fayetteville. So, again, I bring those up simply to say, celebrate this. This is a good week, but we need to continue to see these performances. We need to see it against A&M. I can't just look at a logo of a Longhorn and then say, okay, everything's been solved, especially when that team could end up, tanking. So hopefully the Gators build onto this in College Station, then come back home, continue to build onto it with Mississippi State, get the bye, win in Jacksonville against Georgia, getting Billy Napier's first win in Jacksonville, and then the 2 road games, Kentucky, where we got blown out 2 years ago. Granted, they're not the same team anymore, but you never know if they get a back against the wall mentality. And then on the road at Vaught Hemingway against Ole Miss, perhaps the toughest game left outside of A&M. And then the home game against the Vols. And if you listen to Skylar in our, preseason thoughts, talked about battered Vol syndrome and how that plays into the mind of the Volunteers and their fans. And then the home game against Florida State, which looks a lot more winnable after Miami's visit to Joke Shambles this past Saturday. But with that said, again, great win for the Gators, 29-21 over the Texas Longhorns. Celebrate it, and I'll be back to talk about the Texas A&M game a little bit later this week. Thank you all for listening, and as always, go Gators.